Hello and welcome to our webinar entitled Comparing SAP S4 HANA versus Oracle Cloud versus Microsoft Dynamics 365. My name is Eric Kimberling, CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting Group here in Denver, Colorado in the United States. I want to thank you all for joining here today. And in this 30-minute webinar, we're going to cover a few things. We're going to provide an overview of these three leading ERP systems, and we're also going to look at some of the differences between the different systems out there for those of you that are about to embark on a digital transformation. Perhaps you're in the middle of evaluating technology, or perhaps you're just interested in knowing a little bit more about the market. So before we get started, though, just a quick introduction. As I mentioned, I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting Group. My name is Eric Kimberling. I've been in the ERP space now for about 20 years. I began my career implementing, from an organizational change perspective, some of the larger ERP systems, primarily SAP and Oracle. And throughout my career, after working at a big consultancy and then going to work at a couple smaller firms, continued to do that same type of work, but also got to get more involved with Microsoft Dynamics as well as some smaller tier 2 systems as well. I've been doing ERP consulting now for 20 years from an organizational change perspective, but also helping clients select and implement systems. I've also been quite involved from a project management and business process reengineering perspective. And in more recent years, in the last 5 or 7 years, maybe 8 or 10 years by now, I've been doing more and more expert witness work. So that's something that I've become more involved with over the years, is doing more of that type of work. So that's given me kind of a front row seat to what happens when ERP implementations don't go well, and kind of opens your eyes to some of the challenges that organizations face. So the agenda for today is, first of all, to review the objectives of the webinar. I'm going to talk a little bit about Third Stage Consulting Group, what we do, and a little bit about our background for those of you that aren't familiar with us. If you're not already a client or you haven't been on one of our webinars before, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll get into a high-level overview of these three different solutions, talk about the difference between the solutions, and then finally open it up to any questions you might have. So the objectives here are, first of all, to share a technology-agnostic overview of S4 HANA, Oracle Cloud, and Dynamics 365. We are an independent consulting firm, and that's something we'll talk about here in a second. So we really don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak, as far as which product is better. We're just here to simply provide an agnostic view of the three different solutions. We'll also provide an understanding of the high-level differences between these three products. And then finally, I also wanted to point out that Third Stage Consulting is not affiliated with SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, or any other ERP vendor for that matter. So when we talk about being technology agnostic, we absolutely are. We're not a VAR, we're not a reseller, we're not economically tied to any of these different solutions. So we are truly giving a 100% agnostic opinion here today as far as what these strengths and weaknesses of these different systems are. So a little bit about Third Stage Consulting Group before we dive into the details of the session. We are essentially a 100% technology agnostic consulting firm that helps clients with their digital strategies and their digital transformations. And that includes everything from helping define the initial digital strategy to helping evaluate and select software, to helping define what the implementation roadmap should look like and what a realistic implementation plan should be, as well as providing project management support throughout the transformation and throughout the implementation, along with organizational change management, which is probably our biggest strength, especially given that my background came up in the world of organizational change. And then finally, business process management and business process improvement. So when we talk about transformations, we're not a system integrator, we're not a VAR, but we provide services that help clients through the entire transformation and augment the services that you might find from a system integrator. So acting as an extension of your project management office and or providing quality assurance during implementation, for example, or providing organizational change support, which most system integrators and VARs and resellers don't provide very well. And then finally, as I mentioned before, the business process reengineering piece, which is an important part of any implementation. So some of the corporate values that we share, I'll just briefly talk about them. Independence is obviously very important. That's a key part of our business model. And for the last 12 or 13 years, I've been in independent consultant associated with companies that I've started that are not affiliated with software companies, but at the same time have a deep understanding of the different systems out there and the strengths and weaknesses of these different solutions and understanding of best practices and how to implement them. We also have a client focus, and I know as a consulting organization that may sound like a no-brainer, but compared to most organizations, we do have a very high touch, very hands-on client focus in making sure that our clients are satisfied, making sure we're adding value, and really understanding the client's organization and their business and their culture before giving any sort of canned or prescriptive types of solutions that a lot of consultants might provide. We're also very collaborative. We work with not only our clients, but also other system integrators and peers in the industry, and some cases even competitors. We also hire the best people. So we have a very intelligent team. They're thought leaders. They're people that have been doing this for a long time. They're very good at what they do. We tend not to hire college graduates that don't have some level of expertise and understanding and experience with these types of transformations. And then finally, integrity. That's a big part of who we are in making sure that we're above board with our independence first and foremost, because most consulting organizations are not independent. So maintaining that integrity is extremely important to us. And then finally, focusing on the important things, the things that are likely to make or break your project and ensure that our clients are successful throughout their entire transformations and implementations. So I mentioned before, finally, just one last slide here about third stage. This talks a bit about our services, some of the things we provide, everything from digital strategy, software evaluation, selection and validation, all the way through implementation support, which is what most of what we do is implementation support. So helping clients with the organizational change components of their transformations, helping with project management, project QA, as well as the business process management re-engineering. And then the bottom right, you see 3 other services. One in particular, I hope you never have to hire us for, which is the ERP expert witness services. So generally, attorneys will hire us to become experts or independent experts in lawsuits involving ERP systems or digital transformations that have not gone well. So when we look at the philosophy of third stage, and this isn't even really about third stage, this is more about your project and how you should think about making your transformation successful. If you look at the first and second stage of a typical digital transformation ERP project, what you find is that most companies will get stuck in one of these first 2 stages. Either the project fails outright and they don't finish it, or more commonly, which is where most companies get stuck, is in that second stage where they finished the implementation, but they didn't get the scope they expected. There was budget and time overruns. They didn't get the benefits realization of the ROI they expected, and there's some type of operational disruption. So that's where most companies, about 80% of companies, get stuck, is in that second stage. And then a minority of companies, about 10 or 15% or so, actually get to that third stage, which is where they've implemented the scope they expected, they're on time, they're on budget, they've realized the ROI they expected, and they become self-sufficient and maintain a culture of continuous improvement throughout. So the way to think about your project is really how high do you want to set the bar, and how successful do you want to be? And third stage is kind of an analogy, or there's a third stage terminology in aerospace and defense with rocket launches. So when you launch a multi-stage rocket, typically the first 2 boosters will get the rocket up to a certain point, and then the third stage rocket will kind of blast off from there and get to the ultimate height and speed that it needs to get to. So it's kind of an analogy we use for digital transformations in ERP projects is, let's figure out how not to get bogged down by those first 2 stages. Let's get through those first 2 stages and let the third stage get us to that ultimate level. And those are some of the best practices that we talk about in our webinars with our clients, is what are some of those best practices to realize the third stage. So that's a little bit about our company, what we do, and our philosophy around these types of projects. So what I want to do now for the next 10 minutes or so is just dive into a high-level overview of SAP, Oracle, and Microsoft Dynamics 365. And just to set expectations, I'm not going to provide a demo. I'm not going to get into specific functionality. I could easily spend hours on each of these solutions and show you a bunch of different bells and whistles. But that's not the intent of today. Given the time frame that we have here today, we're really going to focus on a high-level understanding of what are these 3 different products, what are the differences between them, and what are some of the general decision criteria we might use to determine which one or more of these solutions might be best for our organization, or where we might spend a lot of our time evaluating as part of our digital strategy. So to start first with SAP, and this is in no particular order, or actually it is in a particular order, it's by market share. So we'll start with the largest ERP provider, which is SAP, and most people are familiar with that solution. In some cases have worked with that solution in their past. And when you look at S4 HANA, they've really been developing this whole HANA platform at SAP for quite some time now. Since 2011 is when they first rolled out the overall architecture, the in-memory platform for HANA. And as you can see, is from 2012 to 2015 is really where they migrated the core SAP applications over to the HANA platform, making it cloud enabled, providing a SaaS option as well. And over time, they brought different modules and different functionality over, kind of wrapping it up in 2014 and 15 with providing more of the consolidated data, the instant financial insights, as well as the simplified data model in a slightly different user interface. So S4 HANA has really been in development for some time now, as has the other two solutions we'll talk about as well. But just wanted to share from a maturity perspective how many years this has been in the making. And one thing I'll mention when we talk about maturity of products, relatively speaking, if you've been in the space for a while, and I've been doing this 20 years, this is the first time in my career where you've got 3 different products out there that are relatively immature. And I don't mean immature in a bad way in terms of it doesn't have the functionality or capabilities. It's just these are new platforms in some ways, in many ways, that are untested, unproven in a lot of ways. There's not a lot of case studies out there or references of companies that have successfully implemented and used these solutions over time. Although that is changing, and a year or two from now, that will be an obsolete point. But that is something to think about if you're a CIO or an IT director and you're used to being able to go find many different situations or examples of companies that have implemented these solutions. It's just not the case with SAP or Oracle or Microsoft as well, given kind of the massive changes they've made to their platforms and their solutions. So if we dive in a little bit more and just look at the functionality, looking at S4 HANA in particular and some of the functionality that's been brought over, you can see that the most recent version is 1709, which I think was released late last year, September, October of late last year. And you can see that some of the different functionality that's been brought over, and a lot of it's been driven, a lot of the focus and the new functionality with S4 HANA is on the, I don't want to call it the machine learning aspect, but more of the predictive analytics and more of the smart computing type of functionality, where we're looking at ways to provide machine learning around some financial processes and manufacturing processes. The cash application has a new machine learning application. So they're rolling out more of this advanced functionality, which is really where they're focused now. And they've brought over most of the core functionality that you would think of when you think of an ERP system historically. Most of that has been brought over at this point over to the cloud or to the S4 HANA platform. And then you can see they have this digital core of S4 HANA, which is kind of that, think of it as the core as the core back office systems that you're used to thinking of ERP. But what they've done is they've also brought in, the Internet of Things and supply chain, customer experience, workforce engagement, spend management through these other applications that they've either developed or in some cases acquired, as is the case of Concur and SuccessFactors, for example, Ariba as well. So they've brought in these, I don't want to call them third-party applications, but these other applications that are integrating with the digital core of S4 HANA. And one of the things that's unique about S4 HANA is they do have different deployment options, which a lot of clients like. You don't have to go with the cloud solution. You don't have to go with the SaaS solution, although you can. And you can also do the on-premise capabilities or the on-premise deployment model. So, on one hand, the vendors, all 3 of these vendors are pushing very heavily and aggressively into cloud and SaaS solutions. But on the other hand, in the case of SAP, they're still providing the option for on-premise. And I think my opinion is that that's probably a smart move, just because so many larger organizations aren't quite ready to move everything to the cloud yet. They've built up these internal IT infrastructures over years and years of time. And it's going to be a matter of time before they start switching over to the cloud as well. So that's a real high level overview of SAP and HANA and the architecture, the scope, the evolution of the product. And now I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about Oracle Cloud. So when we look at Oracle Cloud, it's a similar type of evolutionary process they've gone through. They've moved some of their legacy applications like eBusiness Suite, J.D. Edwards, and Siebel, PeopleSoft, some of the functionality from those different solutions. They started by moving that functionality over to the cloud. Then they started, as that functionality was moving over, they were also connecting or integrating with the on-premise solutions and with the functionality that had not yet been brought over to the cloud. And I believe, from what I understand, most recently, I believe there's still some functionality that they're still bringing over from on-premise into the cloud. So when you go with an Oracle Cloud solution, you're not necessarily going to have everything in the cloud. There are still going to be some on-premise needs potentially, depending on how broad or diverse your functionality needs are. So that's been a part of it, is connecting with on-premise, but then also extending for mobile and social, customizing the apps and building the apps. And then the more recent transformation or focus has been on transforming through predictive and adaptive analytics or insights, machine learning and AI, and then digital engagement. So that machine learning and AI is a big thing right now for all three vendors, really focusing on how do we take big data and turn it into something that we can actually use to run our business better and be smarter, rather than just collecting a bunch of data and having a bunch of opportunities to create custom reports and things like that, which is kind of the historical view or the past outdated view of business intelligence and reporting. But now we're moving to a transition of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and really making smarter decisions, and in some cases automating processes based on actual data and historic things that have happened, and predicting what might happen in the future, whether it be customer demand or manufacturing demand or inventory needs, whatever the case may be. And so I mentioned before that the scope of Oracle Cloud is really focused on the different functionality of these different solutions that Oracle has acquired and developed over the years, beginning with eBusiness Suite, but then also PeopleSoft, J.D. Edwards, Siebel. And then they've also built this Fusion middleware architecture to tie together not only their own solutions, but also the intent is to make it easier to integrate with third parties. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means in terms of potential flexibility of the solution. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes as well. And then when you look at the architecture of Oracle Cloud, you can see at the top you have a number of different modules, or product families is what Oracle calls it. So you've got the financials, the human capital management, the procurement, projects, et cetera. You have all these different product families and modules. And then you've got the middleware, which is a pretty robust, Fusion is a pretty robust and pretty flexible set of tools that can be used to tie together the different product families within Oracle, or tying together the third-party applications that you might need or want to add to your solution here. So finally, the last slide here I'll mention about Oracle Cloud is just a little bit more about some of the tools within middleware. I'll be candid here. I'm not a technical guy. I'm not an integration or middleware type of guy. That's not my strength, but did want to share a little bit about some of the tools for those of you that are more technical than I might be, some of the technical tools that are provided by Oracle. And this can be a strength. I mean, this is something that a lot of IT groups like, especially if you have a sophisticated IT department that does have quite a bit of technical competency. This can provide a certain amount of flexibility, integration, and different development integration tools that IT departments might view as a strength. It could also be a liability, depending if you don't have that sophistication or that level of knowledge internally. But for those of you that do have a pretty sophisticated IT department, this can be a pretty big strength and a big differentiator with Oracle Cloud. So then we'll move into Microsoft Dynamics 365, and one of the interesting things here is that Microsoft. A lot of people like the look and feel of it simply because it looks like Microsoft Windows, and from a user and employee adoption perspective, Dynamics 365 can be easier to learn, especially in the short term. Dynamics 365 has been developed over the years through the Navision and Xapta, Great Plains. And similar to Oracle, they've kind of taken these different disparate systems that they've acquired and developed over the years and brought that over to the cloud and kind of brought the best of over to the cloud to create Dynamics 365. So you have, the typical type of modules that you would see in any ERP system, but they also, Microsoft Dynamics is pretty strong in the field service side of things, as well as project service automation. So if you're a construction organization or energy or utility company, a lot of times companies of that nature will gravitate towards Dynamics 365 because of some of that functionality they've developed and some of the strengths in those areas. And then they've also got the Azure Internet of Things suite, which is pretty neat suite of tools and functionality and capabilities as well. And then they've got the Power BI tools as well for reporting and analytics and predictive analytics and things of that nature. So as I mentioned before, there's a number of different solutions that go into Dynamics 365. You used to have different solutions with Great Plains, Navision, Dynamics SL, Dynamics CRM, and Xapta as well. And now everything's kind of moving over to Dynamics 365. Now, the challenge with Dynamics, and we'll talk about this here in a second in a little bit more detail, is that in the Microsoft channel, historically and even today, the Microsoft channel has been pretty fragmented. Microsoft typically doesn't sell direct to businesses, which is different from SAP and Oracle, where they tend to be more actively involved in the sales cycle or helping sell to organizations. Microsoft takes more of a handoff approach and lets the resellers and the partner channel kind of drive most of the sales. And along with that comes a bit of fragmentation. So you still have companies out there that are really focused on Navision or Great Plains, and they're still pushing those legacy products. So if you're really looking for the most recent with Dynamics 365, you want to make sure that the system integrator or reseller that you might be talking to is knowledgeable in that area and has some capabilities. So you can see that everything is kind of shifting over from their legacy products into the cloud. And again, I'll compare them to Oracle because it's a similar type of approach because they've grown largely through acquisition, where SAP, with their core ERP anyway, has been primarily developed internally, with the exception of Concur and SuccessFactors and some of those other kind of outlying areas within ERP. So then, as I mentioned before, the whole platform is built on Microsoft Azure, which is probably not surprising. And other ERP systems are starting to migrate. I think I just saw on my LinkedIn feed or in the news today that Epicor is moving to the Azure platform as well. And so over time, you'll start to see more and more companies moving to kind of that standard platform. So you can see that they're focusing on marketing and sales and financials as some of their initial and future releases as well here in the coming months. And then the other one other interesting thing about Dynamics 365 is that they do have a pretty good ecosystem built. It's a fairly open product, or a relatively open product, I should say, and it historically has been compared to Oracle and SAP, where it's been more focused on creating this ecosystem of partner solutions. So a lot of resellers and system integrators will not only become Dynamics 365's partners, but they will create some kind of solution specific to their customer base, whether it's a certain type of industry solution or a certain type of functionality that's maybe a little bit different than what the core Dynamics 365 product does. So because of the product's flexibility and because of the way Microsoft goes to market by having their partners do most of the selling, they've kind of combined those two things to enable partners to create industry-specific solutions and their own intellectual property, their own variations of Dynamics 365, which can be good because it gives you more options in the marketplace, but it also creates a bit of confusion. You have to make sure you know what exactly you're getting. It creates a certain amount of dependency on one specific reseller because they own that intellectual property. So there's, as with any decision here, there's pros and cons, but the interesting thing with Dynamics is the way they've built that type of ecosystem and the partner industry solutions as well. So that's a real quick 20,000 foot flyover view. And again, the intent is not to show you demos or screenshots or anything, but just to talk conceptually about the high level direction that these companies are going with their products. But I want to spend a little bit of time now just going through some major differences between the products. So if I'm a CIO or IT director, and those are typically who we work with when we're helping clients with their digital strategies to figure out what is the platform or platforms that are going to be the core of those digital strategies. Oftentimes they want to know, well, what, should we look at all three of these products? Should we look at tier twos? Should we look at best of breed? And so what I like to do is just kind of provide a general sense of direction in terms of, order of magnitude. How do these products compare to one another? Where are the strengths and weaknesses conceptually and kind of at a very high level? And I'll give you another caveat. These are my opinions. This is not based on any sort of science or any sort of quantitative research. This is just based on 20 years of doing this and more recently focusing on these three products, among others. These are the differences I see conceptually between these three products. So first of all, when we look at maturity of cloud offerings, and I'd say that's a big challenge for all three vendors, is because, again, the maturity is relatively immature, for lack of a better word. But S4 HANA tends to, in my opinion, has a bit more maturity just because they've been working. It's not that they've been working on the solution for longer. It's just that they had a more integrated solution to begin with. And it seemed as though the migration to the cloud was quicker with SAP when compared to Dynamics or Oracle Cloud. In many cases, especially with Oracle Cloud, I think there's still a lot of functionality that's still missing from that Oracle Cloud solution. There's still a lot of functionality that's in the on-prem version that's not in the cloud version that is still being worked through. And I think part of that is just simply because they acquired these big companies like JD Edwards and PeopleSoft. And so, that's obviously easier said than done to migrate all that stuff over to the cloud and reconcile the differences between the different solutions there. So when I look at scalability of solutions, I'd give a slight edge to S4 HANA as well. And when I talk about scalability, I'm talking about I view scalability as the amount of standardization, I guess you would say, and I'm at a loss of words here for a second, but it's basically the ability to create a common platform that for a bigger company across multiple geographies potentially to really scale the growth of the company. And so that's the way I view scalability. There's many different definitions of it. You could also be talking about technical scalability. Can it process a certain number of transactions and whatnot? All three of these systems are scalable. They can handle, Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 organizations, and all of them do support Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 organizations. But when I look at true scalability, as far as which one's going to allow me to scale the easiest and fastest, if I'm a global company trying to standardize my operations, I'd give the slight edge to S4 HANA, followed by Oracle Cloud, and then Dynamics 365. Less so, although I think my opinion is that D365 is catching up to the other two in some ways. But S4 HANA and Oracle Cloud, I think have a slight edge over Microsoft Dynamics when it comes to scalability. And then when we look at flexibility of functionality in terms of if the software doesn't work the way I want it to out of the box, how easy is it for me to change? How flexible is it? Can I change it? Can I allow it to fit my business needs? I give the slight edge there to Microsoft Dynamics, partly because from a usability perspective, it's easier to learn in the short term because it has a Microsoft look and feel, but also because the integration and customization tool sets are pretty user friendly as well. And it compared to the other two products, it's a bit easier to change D365 than it is to change Oracle, or especially S4 HANA. S4 HANA is going to be the harder one to retain that sort of flexibility. Although I know SAP is working hard to change that perception or that reality of their system. And then when I look at the flexibility of technical integration, I give a slight edge to Oracle Cloud simply because of that Fusion middleware. If you know you're going to be bringing in third-party systems like a manufacturing execution system, if you're a manufacturer, if you're looking for more machine learning type stuff coming from the shop floor, and those are going to be through third-party applications, Oracle Cloud makes it easier through that Fusion middleware to bring in data and functionality and processes from other third parties. So, again, it gets back to what's more important to you. Is if that's important to you, then Oracle Cloud has a slight edge there, followed by Dynamics. And then again, I think S4 HANA is probably the weakest in that area, although If I were an SAP sales guy, and maybe I'll speak on behalf of SAP sales guys, I think their message there would be, we don't need that much flexibility in terms of technical integration because our product is already integrated and we already have such broad functionality that there isn't as much of a need for third-party systems. So I think that would probably be a counterpoint to that. But if I know I've got to keep certain systems in my environment, it's going to be easier to integrate with Oracle Cloud, and then Dynamics, and then finally S4 HANA. When I look at employee adoption, especially in the short term, Dynamics 365, in my opinion, in my experience, has been easier for organizations to learn. A large part of that, again, is because the Windows or Microsoft look and feel that employees are just used to. I'd say Oracle Cloud is probably a close second. S4 HANA is more difficult. Having said that, though, when you look at long-term benefits realization, S4 HANA actually rates higher than the other two. So I think the message here is that if you're looking for quick hits and you're kind of an agile organization that wants to move quickly and get some immediate ROI, the advantage might go to D365 and Oracle Cloud. But if you're looking more longer term about how do I get long-term employee adoption and efficiency and effectiveness, S4 HANA is quantitatively shown that it can deliver a longer or a better ROI in the longer term than the other two solutions. So it depends on what you're looking at, and it also pertains to risk. A lot of times companies see that S4 HANA might be able to deliver better long-term value, but they also feel that S4 HANA could be a higher risk, and it might be more of a more to stomach, for lack of a better word, during the implementation and during the transformation, because oftentimes it's a more difficult transition. But once companies get there, they tend to realize a higher ROI. And then finally, ease of IT adoption. When I say IT adoption, I mean your IT department. How well will they be able to learn the product and start integrating tools and making changes to the software as they need to over time? I give the slight edge to D365, followed by Oracle Cloud and S4 HANA. What a lot of companies do in the case of S4 HANA and then Oracle Cloud, secondarily, is they'll oftentimes build these centers of excellence to mitigate that risk so that they do build that internal competency to know the software and understand it better. So I'm just speaking in terms of on day 1 or day 90 after go live, how well has IT adopted? Typically, it's more difficult for S4 HANA organizations, unless the caveat being, the exception being, if they were already on SAP and they're migrating or upgrading to the newer version, it's typically easier for them than other customers might find. So just to give you a real quick summary comparison then, if I were to summarize everything we just talked about and maybe talk about what are the major differences and similarities between the two products or the three products. S4 HANA, one thing that we haven't really talked about is this in-memory performance of their data transactions or their transactions and their predictive analytics and the business intelligence. That's a pretty unique model, the whole HANA backbone in terms of the in-memory processing. So it's very, very quick in terms of performance. It helps with machine learning, so it makes better use of data. So those are what I would say some of the big strengths of S4 HANA, as well as that native integration. You still have to integrate. There's still issues and challenges trying to, work through cross-functional business processes, but generally you're dealing with the same system as opposed to a patchwork of different systems, as is the case with the other two vendors. They also provide flexibility of deployment options. So again, you can do on-premise, SaaS, or cloud, but the downsides are that it requires more internal IT sophistication. The end user adoption takes more time. And a lot of organizations view S4 HANA as a bigger risk because oftentimes it's going to cost more. It's going to take more effort and time. But again, it's a long-term play. It's one of those deals that usually bigger companies will make that move because they know the long-term ROI is there. Now with Oracle Cloud, they're more fragmented in their migration to the cloud because of those legacy apps that they acquired. They have a great deal of functional flexibility, especially when you talk about business intelligence, enterprise performance management, analytics. And there's more flexibility with third-party integration with the Fusion middleware. And it does require a certain amount of internal IT sophistication to be able to support that type of framework and architecture. So if you have a pretty good IT department, again, this isn't as big of a deal, but if you've got a If you're a smaller organization and you don't have much of an IT department, or you don't have real strong technical resources internally, that can be a challenge to maintain and to manage longer term. And then finally, with D365, they too have fragmented apps and functionality, but it's very flexible functionality. In fact, their product is so flexible, I oftentimes see that as a liability, because it's so easy to customize the software. Just because you can doesn't mean you should customize the software. And then finally, it's a pretty fragmented partner channel, as I mentioned. So that makes buying Dynamics, in my opinion, a bit more difficult, a bit more uncertain. And so you have to make sure that you've got a good partner, and you also know exactly what you're getting. Which version of D365 are you getting? Are you getting Navision or AX, or are you getting some type of intellectual property that's unique to that reseller? So those are just some of the questions that you'll want to think about and ask as you go through the process here. So after having said all that, which is best for my company? Which one should I choose? And I'm sure that's why you're all here, just so I can tell you which product is the best and save you a lot of time and effort in your software evaluation processes. The bad news is that I don't have a good answer for you. It does depend. I mean, there's so many strengths and weaknesses to each of these solutions. I can make a very strong case for any one of these, and I could also make a very strong case against any one or two of these organizations or these products. So it's really a part of defining who you are as an organization, who you're trying to be, what your strategic goals and objectives are, your culture, organizationally, what's the best fit for you, your strategic goals and direction. All those things will generally point to one or maybe two of these solutions more so than the others. And so it really depends. And so, we work with some companies that are multinational global companies. They're trying to standardize operations. They're really trying to drive efficiency. They can really focus on investing the time and effort in getting through a complex transformation. In those cases, I'd say S4 HANA might be a direction you lean. If you're a mid-sized organization and flexibility is really important to you, and you're trying to grow the company organically, and you're entering new markets and you're very agile as an organization, that might point you more towards either Oracle Cloud or Dynamics 365. So I'm generalizing here and giving you general direction, but there's several different criteria to consider here. So there's a lot more that you can learn about this topic, other topics on our website. If you go to Third Stage Consulting or thirdstage-consulting.com, we have tons of blogs, white papers, videos, webinars, all that sort of thing out on our website. So we encourage you to check it out and learn more. And if you have any questions that we don't get to here today, feel free to reach out to me via email, phone, Twitter, LinkedIn. There's a million different ways to reach me, and I encourage you to reach out. And if you haven't asked a question yet, I'm going to get to Q&A right now, but if you haven't asked questions yet, if you could please just submit those on the right side of your screen. You should see a little tab, second tab in the blue column up and down on your screen. There's a little chat tab. You submit your question there, and I'm the only one that'll see them, so feel free to submit any questions you have. One question here is, do you see Dynamics 365 tying with Office 365? And yes, that's a good point. It does tie pretty well with Office 365, especially SharePoint in terms of document management. Again, the general look and feel is very similar. Outlook with email ties into D365. Having said that, a lot of vendors are moving towards that and integrating better with Office 365. For example, I know this is outside the scope of today's discussion, but Epicor, again, that's another product that just top of mind because I think they just had their user conference and a bunch of news coming out, but they tie in pretty well to SharePoint and Office 365 as well as do, to a certain degree, Office and Oracle and SAP as well. Another question is SAP S4 HANA 1709 as strict as older SAP R3? I guess relatively speaking, maybe not quite as strict. There's a little more flexibility, but relatively speaking to Oracle and Microsoft, yes, it is. I'd consider HANA a strict solution, and I don't mean that in a negative way. For some companies, that can be a very positive thing. When I say what my interpretation of your word strict is, what oftentimes people say is rigid, which is also has a negative connotation. But I view it as kind of a standardized solution, and it can be painful for organizations. A lot of organizations don't like that, but a lot of organizations also find value in standardizing their operations and having consistent business processes, even if the processes themselves aren't ideal all the time. So I wouldn't say it's as strict as the older R3 SAP, but I'd say it's still more more strict or rigid or standardized than Oracle or Microsoft. Another question here is, do you also compare and contrast Microsoft Dynamics against other options like Acumatica, Unit 4, and Sage X3? Answer is yes, we do. Something we commonly do. And Microsoft is pretty unique in that they're kind of right in the middle market there, where they're oftentimes competing with SAP and Oracle, but they're also oftentimes competing with some of the tier 2 solutions like the ones you mentioned. And then I'll have time for just one more question here. And I apologize if I haven't gotten to yours. Feel free to reach out after the fact, but in the interest of time, I'll just keep it to one more question since I'm already over time here. It's actually more of a comment, I guess, than a question, but interesting thing about third stage rockets, they often stay attached for continued placement and course corrections. So that's a good analogy and maybe a good place to close, in that, as you're going through the evaluation process, you want to make sure that you're looking at what's best for your organization, and you're also pivoting and adjusting your evaluation and your digital strategy based on who you are and who you're trying to become. And as you learn more through the process, you want to make sure that you're adjusting as well. And certainly, keep third stage in mind as you go through your process, whether you need help comparing different systems or defining your digital strategy or helping you with the implementation. That's exactly what we do. And all our team and I have really done for the last 20 years has been focused on that. So want to thank you all for your time today. Great session. Feel free to share this recording with anyone else that you think might be interested. You'll get a link to the recording here probably in about 3 to 4 hours. You should receive an automated email from me that has a link to that recording once it's posted. So thank you all for your time. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you all soon. Take care.